So my name is Jeff Katzen. I'm with CenturyLink. I lead an organization across North America for CenturyLink that's focused on cloud. We're basically a pre-sales technical organization. There's 3 different teams. One team is, it's kind of like it's an inside help desk that helps salespeople and SEs with any kind of issues they have around cloud. A technical question or a pricing question or something like that, so it's facing internally within the company. They also do orientations of our cloud platform for customers that come onto the platform and start using the platform. So that's one aspect of the team. Another aspect of the team is a cloud solution architect team who have very deep technical expertise within the platform. And then there's a third part of it, which is kind of a technical sales team. Evangelist team, so we speak at events like this quite a bit. We engage with customers a lot, and it's all around our cloud platform, CenturyLink Cloud, and how customers are using and adopting it. And so the reason why I bring all that up is because this presentation is really the experience that we've gathered. It's the summary of the experience we've gathered across these 3 teams over the last several years, dealing with customers across different industry verticals, different sizes, different areas, and it's all kind of summarized. All this experience and also the feedback we've received from customers is all summarized in this presentation. And it's all about how to engage with a cloud service provider and ensure success. And I'll spend the first couple of slides just talking about why that's important and what's going on in the industry and kind of building the idea behind the presentation. But before I do that, just by show of hands, if you're familiar with CenturyLink as a company, can you just show me your hands? All right, so a few people. How about CenturyLink as it relates to cloud computing services? A little bit? Okay. Yeah, so I do these kinds of presentations a lot across in different forums around the country, and I'm always asked that question. And I think, what I found is that we've done a pretty good job of kind of focusing our brand within the software developer space. Like, if software developers are more and more over the last year or so, it's really increased a lot. Familiar with CenturyLink Cloud and some of our capabilities, some of the things we're doing around CenturyLink Labs, which is our kind of research and development arm. It's not really research and development, but they publish a lot of open source projects. You can check out what they're doing on CenturyLinkLabs.com. And so a big reason for us being here and for us doing that is this kind of presentation is to get the word out and expose people to CenturyLink, to who we are, to the kind of things that we're doing. So CenturyLink is a company that has grown through acquisition and really transformed through acquisition. We were founded about 85 years ago. We're headquartered in Monroe, Louisiana. When we started, we were a rural telecommunications company, providing phone service to rural parts of the U.S. The company grew through acquisition, adding more of these rural telecom providers in different areas. And over the last 7 years, we've made a series of very strategic acquisitions to really change the face of the company into who we are today, which is an IT service provider. So we purchased Quest about 7 years ago, global telecommunications company. We purchased Savvis about 3 years ago, actually 4 years ago. Savvis had 58 data centers around the world, cloud, co-location, managed hosting services within those data centers. And since then, we've purchased a number of very strategic cloud computing companies in the infrastructure as a service and platform as a service space. So when we talk about hybrid IT, that whole portfolio of services that we have, from network to co-location to managed services to public cloud to private cloud, that's how we view hybrid IT. And so what we're going to talk about throughout this presentation is when you're engaging with a cloud service provider at the infrastructure as a service or platform as a service layer, how to do that. And again, it's based on feedback that my team has gained over the course of the last several years, and also feedback specifically that we've got from customers. So cloud is everywhere. I'm the cloud guy, and it's especially true for me. Every conversation I have, every presentation I do, every blog post I read, whether it's an internal conversation or a conversation with a customer, it's always about cloud. And so it's very easy for me to believe that just cloud it's everywhere. It's the only solution to every problem. And the reality is very, very different. So Gartner did a study. They did it in 2011 and 2014, and it's called Taming the Digital Dragon. and you can kind of do a search on there. And so they surveyed a whole bunch of their customers around the world. And what one of the survey questions was about was, what percentage of workloads will never sit in a public cloud? And will never sit. So not what percentage of workloads aren't you using in a public cloud today, but in the future, what will never be in a public cloud? In 2011, the answer was 25%. In 2014, which was the latest one, the answer was still 25%. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. It seems like they're doing this every 3 years. It'll be interesting to see what happens in 2017, what that answer is going to be. My sense is it's probably going to be the same. I think there's always going to be a point in time, there's always going to be capabilities that don't fit within a public cloud. And the question is, if you or your institution is moving towards utilizing public cloud services, what do you do with that 25% or greater of workloads, applications that are never going to fit within that model? How do you ensure success? How do you leverage cloud where it makes sense and leverage other services where cloud doesn't make sense? And that's some of what we're going to discuss today. So this is an interesting statistic. It's another survey that was done. The source is at the bottom over there. I don't know if you can see it, but it was done late last year by a consulting company in the UK. And they surveyed 358 companies in the UK, and all of these companies had embarked on a cloud project. They'd started the cloud project, and they were at some point in the process engaging with a cloud service provider, talking about using public cloud. And one of the questions they asked was, are you not satisfied, satisfied, completely satisfied? And only 27% of the 358 respondents said they were completely satisfied, which is, for me personally, again, I'm the cloud guy. I think cloud's everywhere, and it's just this amazing thing. I'm very passionate about the industry and about CenturyLink's capabilities, and to see that low of a satisfaction rate, to me, is very, very surprising. Some other stats that they said as a result of the survey was 43% stopped their project or stalled their project midway. 2/3 changed direction completely. So, what I take from this is, yes, cloud is this buzzword. It's out there. It's every kind of IT newsletter, blog post, presentation at events like this is focused on cloud. But there's a way to engage with a cloud service provider to ensure that the project that you engage in is successful. And part of what I'm looking to do throughout this presentation is two things. So one, express our view and some ideas around how to raise that satisfaction percentage. And the second thing is introduce you to this concept of hybrid IT and what to do with these workloads that don't fit within a public cloud. So, yeah, that guy... So how do we get there? So this is the agenda, 4 sections. Talk about definitions. What does cloud actually mean? We'll talk about defining a purpose. Why are you engaging in a cloud project? We'll talk about things to consider from our perspective. And again, this is feedback from our customers around what to look for when you're looking for a cloud service provider, and identify characteristics of success. So once you've gone through all of those things, you've selected a provider or multiple providers, and you have applications and workloads running within that cloud platform, some of these ideas are feedback that our customers have given us, ways they've changed internally to leverage cloud effectively that have ensured that the project isn't just a one-off project, that it is really successful. So we'll talk about all those things. So I'm pretty big on definitions. If you read anything in IT, it has a bunch of buzzwords associated with it, and it's definitely true when it comes to cloud. Infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, all mean different things to different people. I'm sure if I asked everybody in this room to define what platform as a service means, there'll be 10 different definitions. And what I found is talking internally and talking to customers, if you don't go beyond the buzzwords and you don't actually define what it is that you're talking about, both with an internal stakeholder and an external stakeholder, there's oftentimes a very big gap. And right from the beginning, the project is off to the wrong start. And I've engaged in many conversations with customers around a capability like platform as a service, where a customer has one expectation of what it is, and I have a totally different expectation. And it's not about who's right or who's wrong. wrong. It's just about ensuring that when you engage in a process like this, that you get beyond the definitions and you get beyond the buzzwords and you understand truly what it is that you're asking for, what it is that your internal constituents are asking for, your boss is asking for, and what it is that a service provider is providing to you, and make sure that there's alignment between those three different groups. So that's the first step to success. So that's the definition. Once you've got the definition and everybody's on the same page as to what the project's all about, it's about defining your purpose, understanding why you want to engage in this project. So you want to start using public cloud for a specific application. What's the reason you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? What do you want to get out of it? I'm a big believer, and I've actually made my whole career over the last 20 years in IT about understanding technology and applying technology to solve a business problem. And that's really what cloud is all about. But when we've engaged with customers, there's various reasons why someone is looking to engage in a cloud project. One of the most common ones is, cloud's going to save me money, and I want to kind of start using cloud because I've got to reduce my IT spend. And while, it's possible that saving money is the outcome of what you're looking to do, it shouldn't really be a goal, because cloud and the capabilities that cloud provide can bring a lot more to the table than just saving money. When you think about it, going back to this concept of hybrid IT, if you have a student, let's say like a student CRM application or a student database that houses all student information, and that CRM application is pretty big and it's pretty static. It doesn't change over the course of the year. If you take that application and you put it in a public cloud which is built for flexibility, it's not necessarily going to be cheaper to run that application in a cloud platform. It might be, but it's not necessarily going to be. If, on the other hand, you have that application and front-ending that application is web servers, and the web servers are how students access that application and access that database. And let's say over the course of the year, there's very little utilization of the web servers. Students may be changing majors or adding courses or things like that. I'm just making up an application here. But during enrollment time, there's massive peaks. Because every student is going on this platform. They all want to sign up for classes. They all want to make sure they're registered appropriately. So that is something that makes a lot of sense in cloud, that web front end, because for most of the year, the utilization is very low. For certain enrollment times, utilization skyrockets and gets really high. And what cloud allows you to do is to match capacity to demand. So you don't have to build out capacity for the enrollment period for that piece of the application, for that front-end piece of the application. You can use a public cloud platform for the piece of the application where it makes sense, which is the student-facing part of it. You can use managed hosting or co-location servers from a service provider like CenturyLink to house that back-end application. And that's hybrid IT, is combining different components of a portfolio from a service provider like CenturyLink to meet the needs of different components of an application. So that CRM application, that database is big, it's static, it's not moving, doesn't make sense to go into public cloud. Maybe you've invested all this money already in the hardware and the licensing and the support to run that whole environment. You can put that in co-location and you can front-end that with public cloud, all within the same data center. So leveraging different capabilities where it makes sense. So it's not necessarily about saving money, it's about utilizing your money more effectively, and it's about choosing different, I'll call it modalities, different ways of supporting an application where it makes sense. So the next reason why people come to us for engaging in a cloud project is about headcount reduction. And I think a lot of customers view it as it's kind of a form of outsourcing, and again, it's about saving money. I expect to reduce my headcount as a result of this. And what we found is actually exactly the opposite. What cloud allows organizations like yourselves to do is to do more with less. So or to do more with the same amount of people. You can have your teams in place today, but you can scale those teams and you can support different departments within your universities with the same amount of resources you have. And what it requires in order for that to happen is investment in the teams, because the skill set required to run a data center is very different than the skill set required to run or utilize cloud services. The one is much more physically oriented with, running a data center is all about space, power, bandwidth, servers. Running a cloud platform is all about software and automation, and we'll talk about some of that. But it's definitely, headcount reduction is never, it's the opposite. It requires new skills, more investment, more people with different skills, but that growth allows, massive growth in supporting the business or different departments. Another example we've heard a lot is following the herd. Someone's at a presentation like this saying how great cloud is and how awesome it is, and you've got to do it. Or your boss comes to you to do it, or one of your internal customers, a department head will come to you and do it and say, you need to engage in cloud. Everyone's doing this cloud thing. You need to follow the herd. And we need to do it as well. And that's certainly not a good reason to do it either. So what is a good reason? From our perspective, it's all about agility, which is really speed to market. So I wrote a blog post about 3.5 years ago, and I surveyed the top 50 of our public cloud customers at that time. And the survey was, why are you using cloud? What are the reasons you're doing it? And some of the examples that came up was expansion into new geographies, software development processes, launching new businesses, launching new applications. So cloud is all about automation. It's about getting access to a resource, whatever that resource is, very, very quickly. And so the best reason to launch a cloud project is to take advantage of that automation. Whether it's a server, whether it's a network, whether it's a firewall, whatever that resource is, the reason to engage successfully in a cloud project is because you have a business need that matches to that takes advantage of that automation. So in the higher ed space, it might be, research computing, where there's, a lot of analytics, a lot of number crunching happening within the medical department, and they don't need that capacity all the time. They need to scale up the capacity and turn it down. And so that is exactly agility. That enables your research departments to move really quickly. So we've talked about definitions, making sure that you're on the same page with all the internal stakeholders as well as your service providers. We've talked about the reasons why to engage in a cloud project and why not to engage in a cloud project. Now we're going to talk about some of the things to consider when you select a service provider. So obviously we at CenturyLink are a service provider, so I try to be a little bit unbiased in this approach, but this is feedback that we've gathered from our customers over the last several years across all those teams. So it's not necessarily us saying this, it's feedback from our customers. So the first thing to consider is additional services. I gave the example earlier of that student database and using public cloud in conjunction with some other services to meet the needs of the business and to meet the needs of the application. Another example is not really relevant to the higher ed space, but I'm going to actually meet with this customer tomorrow. So that's why it popped into my head. So they're a healthcare company, and they provide SaaS applications to their end customers, and they love the idea of running that application on a public cloud. From a security perspective, one of the requirements that the security team has given them is they need physical security devices. So that they don't want to there's plenty of security built into our public cloud platform and any public cloud platform, but they want to surround our public cloud platform with physical security devices that matches their security model. And so basically what that enables them to do is to have the flexibility of a public cloud to launch new customers onto that platform, but still meet the needs of the security and compliance team internally. And what we're going to do for them is put those physical security devices in our managed services pod surrounding the public cloud platform. So it's another example of hybrid IT. So the idea here is that not every workload, cloud isn't the answer to every question. And so not every workload is going to be 100% suited for a public cloud, no matter what that is, any application. And so what do you do with pieces of that application that don't fit within a public cloud? So when you're talking to cloud service providers, look at the full range of services that they provide. And every cloud service provider is solving this problem in different ways. Even some of the pure play ones that are out there, they have relationships with people to solve these kinds of problems. So it is a real problem that their customers are telling them. And everyone has a different approach to solving them. So understand what those capabilities are across the board, beyond just cloud, and how you can handle that 25% that's never going to go in a cloud platform. Understand the real cost of cloud. So this is a very big challenge, and I'm actually engaged in a discussion around this point with a university that's somewhere on the East Coast. I'll kind of leave it at that. So they've got a consultant engaged, and the consultant is obviously looking to add a lot of value to the university, and they've embarked on this cloud project and looking to, one of the ways they add value to the university is to ensure that they're getting the best price. So, and this happens a lot. I'm not picking on this specific incident, but it's just, there's emails going around today about it. So again, it's in my head. So what they're saying is, I'm going to assume, so every cloud provider has a different approach, has different capabilities, and the industry is certainly not commoditized. Everyone's very, very different. And in that kind of a model, it's very difficult to compare pricing between all the different providers. So what they've done, and what happens a lot, is they've looked at one specific component. So let's say an hourly cost for CPU or an hourly cost for RAM, and they've tried to standardize that component across all the service providers. So CenturyLink's provided them an hourly cost. All the other providers have provided them an hourly cost, and they're using that to kind of baseline pricing and come back to us and say, you're X% more expensive. And that's, like I said, it's a very difficult thing to do that, because by doing that, you're kind of assuming that all these cloud platforms are fully commoditized, that they're all the same, that a CPU in CenturyLink is the same as a CPU in Azure, is the same as a CPU in Microsoft, in AWS, and it's really not. So what we try to work with our customers on is look at the big picture, include all, and these are just some of the examples of the other kind of costs, but look at an application that you want to deploy in the cloud, and look at the big picture of the overall costs and use that as a baseline to determine cost. Because if you just go on one specific line item component, you're not gonna really, it's not an apples to apples comparison. So look at the bigger picture. Next thing is performance, and this is very much related to cost as well. So, performance is, it's kind of the same point. So all clouds are not really created equal, and there's a whole mini industry of providers. One of them, called Cloud Harmony, was actually just bought by Gartner. But there's this whole mini industry of providers that have spun up over the course of the last several years. And what they do is they run performance tests across all these different cloud providers. And they turn the results of those performance tests into a value. So, for example, if you have an application or a virtual machine running in CenturyLink Cloud and it performs double as well as a virtual machine running in another platform, you can have a smaller footprint, which means there's lower cost. And so, again, it goes back to looking at the big picture, looking at the whole environment, and understanding that a CPU in one cloud platform is not the same as a CPU deployed in another. Automation friendly. So cloud is all about automation. I think for the most part, hopefully now the industry from a service provider perspective have moved past this idea of cloud washing, of people saying, service providers saying they have a cloud platform, which is really a platform that's all about automation, when they really don't. So really understand, if you're following this flow here, and the reason why you're engaging in a cloud project is about agility or is about getting that level of automation, understand what the level of automation actually is. And also, if there are other components that are part of the solution. So for example, there's a number of customers who utilize a private wide area network connection into our cloud platform. And the experience between those two things is very, very different. If you want to deploy some resource within a public cloud, it takes 5 minutes. You push a button, 5 minutes, that resource is available. Network, firewall, virtual machine, whatever the case is. If you want to deploy an MPLS connection, it takes 45 days. So it's a very different buying experience from a customer perspective. It's a very different service delivery experience from a customer perspective. So understand what the service provider is doing to solve that problem in the long term, because it's something that we're actively involved in. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But also understand, what are they doing today to solve the problem? How do they handle that difference in experience from a customer perspective, because it's a really important point, and it's something that we focus on a lot. Container diversity. So if you're involved or tracking or following the software development industry, container has one definition. I'm going back to what I said earlier about definitions. I'm broadening the definition of what a container actually means. A container is just a place that an application can run, whatever that application is. It doesn't really matter. So for example, when you're looking at cloud platforms, understand what these different containers can be. Is it a virtual machine running on a public cloud? Is it a virtual machine running on a private cloud? Is it a physical server? Is it an actual container, if you're familiar with Docker, like Docker containers for software development? What are the options? Yes, you have a specific application that you're looking at deploying today, and you only need one of those containers, but ultimately the goal would be that you start understanding the benefits of what a public cloud can bring to the table, what a cloud platform can bring to the table, and how you can leverage it across your institution more and more. So I think it's important to understand what the broader capabilities are and how you can leverage them. So I think so understand the roadmap. So, what I mean here is not roadmap by, when I talk to customers a lot, there's always an ask to understand what new features are we rolling out, because we launch features every 3 to 4 weeks onto our platform. So what new features are we rolling out? When are we rolling them out? So that's a difficult conversation to have, because you're not necessarily going to get that information from any cloud service provider. We don't really publish that kind of information. So what I mean by roadmap is, where are we going as a service provider? Where is the service provider you're talking going? What is their vision? What is their direction? And more importantly, does that align with where your institution is going? And do you believe that the capabilities that the service provider is going to roll out, does it match? Does that solve the problems that you see for yourself and for your institution over the course of the next several years? And finally, go hands-on. I can engage in a whole lot of discussions with customers about how great the platform is, about how cheap the platform is, about how highly performant the platform is, about how fully automated it is. But ultimately, it comes down to our customers engaging with the platform, deploying an application. It's a very quick and low-cost thing to do, to deploy an application on 1, 2, 3 different cloud platforms and see for yourself the differences between them. So, the proof is in the pudding. I think that's really the best way to select a provider, or to select more than one provider. All right, so we've talked about definitions, or moving beyond the buzzwords and understanding where making sure that everybody's on the same page with what you're looking to do. We've talked about the reason why to engage in a project with a cloud service provider, and the reason perhaps why not to do it. We've talked about, what did we just talked about? We talked about, when you're talking to a cloud service provider, some ideas to think of beyond some different evaluation points. Now, this last section, we're going to talk about things that customers have said to us that they've changed internally on their end to effectively leverage our cloud platform. So it becomes more than just, keeping the way your business operates in place today. It becomes about, in order to effectively utilize a cloud platform and to ensure that that 20% satisfaction rate is significantly higher, there needs to be changes within our customers' organizations, and customers have made changes to fully leverage and to make it more successful. So there's across 3 or 4 different areas. So the one is process. Support paths is really critical. IT, cloud enables IT to become much more of a service provider to the different departments within the institution. And so when you're a service provider delivering services to your end users, you have an agreement with them. That agreement might be an SLA, it may be a level of support you'll provide them, and if you're leveraging a public cloud platform behind them, you want to understand what the different support paths are that a service provider is offering and what the SLA is, because ultimately you as IT need to stand behind that. So this is, over the next couple of slides, I'll show some screenshots from CenturyLinkCloud.com, which is our public website. There's a huge amount of information there. But so here are some of the examples of the levels of support that we offer. There's often a free level of support, as in this case, the developer level. It's free. As you move up the stack, there's additional levels of support, but there's also additional cost associated with that. And this model is very standard among the cloud service providers in the industry today. So if you think you're getting free support, it may not necessarily be the level of support that's needed to serve your business appropriately. So I guess the message here is, what our customers have told us is, make sure that when you're engaging with a cloud service provider, you understand what you're on the hook to deliver to your business, and that you understand what the cloud service provider is on the hook to deliver to you, both in terms of support and service level agreement. So that's support paths and SLAs. Another one is embracing chargebacks. I see more and more customers moving, internal IT moving to be, like I said, a service provider within the industry. And one of the key aspects of being a service provider is enabling chargebacks or showbacks. If you have an end, if you have the business school or the medical department who's utilizing your cloud platform or the cloud platform that you've chosen, the ability to have visibility, what I call financial governance around that platform, and to enable chargebacks and to basically send them a bill for the resources that they're using, or at the very least show them how much resources they're using and how much that costs, is a key element of that. CenturyLink Cloud, so this is a screenshot from CenturyLink Cloud's control portal, and you can see here the cost of this particular web server is pretty much front and center in the portal. And this whole idea of financial governance, enabling chargeback and showback, and putting control on the number of resources that an end user can deploy is very much built into the platform. So this idea of enabling chargebacks, become a true service provider, because that's really what a cloud service provider allows you in IT to do. So that's process. We'll talk about technology. So applications running in a cloud platform should have different architectures. And here's what I mean by that. So you can take, let's say you've got a blog post that the dean of the business school writes, and it's running on some kind of a website, a public website out there. And that's housed internally in your own infrastructure today. So you can take that application and put it in a cloud platform, and it's going to run fine. There's going to be no issues with it. But really, the idea is that in order to fully take advantage of some of the automation capabilities in the cloud platform, the application has to be developed differently. To take it a step further, so in applications that are deployed today, or what I'll say yesterday, the application relies on things like security and high availability coming from the infrastructure. So if you deploy a large CRM application, that CRM application assumes that the infrastructure and the data center is fully secure and that it is highly available. So if a specific server or a specific piece of storage fails, the application doesn't need to know about it and will just keep on running. And that's how a lot of applications are built today, with that idea in mind. When it comes to cloud, it's exactly flipped on its head, because when you're working with a cloud service provider, you don't necessarily have that amount of control of what's going on in the infrastructure. So now it's the application that has to have the security. It's the application that has to have the high availability built in. A great example of that is Netflix. So everyone's familiar with Netflix. I watch Netflix, they're awesome. They're very vocal Amazon Web Services user, and what they've done is they've created this whole suite of open source tools that they call the Simian Army. One of those tools is called Chaos Monkey. So what Chaos Monkey does is it goes through and randomly shuts down pieces of the application, randomly shuts down pieces of the underlying infrastructure from AWS, and basically constantly simulates failure, because the architect behind the Netflix application understood that as he's using a cloud platform, he's not able to rely on that cloud platform to be up 100% of the time. Even though the SLAs, and yes, it's going to be there, Netflix's application, that's their business, and they can't afford to have it go down. So they built this tool called Chaos Monkey, which goes around and basically fails different pieces of the environment all the time to make sure the application stays up. And in that way, the team is able to learn from the failures and put more resiliency and redundancy and higher availability into the application, because they're not relying on the infrastructure. So it's a very different mindset to delivering applications and deploying applications. And you can absolutely take an application today and, assuming there's no dependencies, put it in a public cloud, but to really increase that 27% success rate and to expand cloud within your organizations and institutions, it's a different mindset and a different way of deploying these applications. And so here's an example. So again, this is CenturyLink Cloud. We've got horizontal and vertical autoscaling, which basically just adds capacity on demand. So for example, when CPU gets more than 80% utilization, we'll add more capacity. And so the question becomes, that's a great capability, especially in the example of the student database. You can just add capacity by itself and take that capacity away by itself. You don't have to get involved yourself. But can the application actually handle that? Doesn't understand that increasing CPU, doesn't know what to do with that, and it's not always the case that that does happen. So different ways of developing software in a cloud environment. embrace automation. So I've already mentioned cloud is all about automation. When you're talking to a service provider, that ability to deploy these resources on demand in several minutes is the benefit of a cloud. But really the way to take that level of automation to the next kind of phase is to expand that automation into your organizations. So we have a number of customers that utilize some capabilities within our platform. So it's not just about deploying a resource, it's about ongoing management of that resource. So if you're familiar with configuration management services like Chef and Puppet and Salt and Ansible, so a lot of our customers use these kinds of tools, and it's not just about using a tool, it's about changing the way they manage their environments and taking the automation that a cloud service provider has and expanding it out more and more into their organization and changing some of the ways they engage with infrastructure. And so this is some of the automation capabilities, configuration management capabilities we have within our own platform. So lightweight standards. So a lot of our customers have told us that within IT, there's a lot of process and there's a lot of approval to deploy new resources. And there's a lot of, the reason that's there is to ensure that end users don't do things that they're not authorized to do or don't basically deploy more than they need to do. So there's a lot of upfront process. What those same customers have told us is in order to fully take advantage of a cloud platform, it's best to kind of get rid of all that process. Because if you're able to deploy a resource like a virtual machine in 5 minutes, but it takes 6 weeks for the person who wants to deploy the resource to get approval to do that, you're kind of missing the point. So a lot of our customers have adopted this trust but verify kind of idea. So giving end users access into the platform, ensuring that, this is a single sign-on capability, so ensuring that there's the security built into the solution, that there's appropriate controls and visibility built around the solution, but at the same time making it much easier for an end user or for IT to deploy these types of resources. So trust but verify, and it's not going to be appropriate for every application, and it's not going to be something that you're going to change overnight, because after all, these processes have been in place and they've served the business well for decades, so it's not going to be just turning on an edge. But start small, deploy an application for one specific application or one specific team. This is how our customers have approached this. People. So people are obviously the most important part of any IT project, right? All these resources don't do anything unless there are people involved. So education needed. So this is something that I personally believe in a lot, is this constant need for education. And even from a service provider's perspective. So my team was just in Seattle last week, and we were getting trained up on some additional capabilities that we just launched into our platform within the next couple of weeks. Every quarter, there's another training in a different part of the country where my team gets together to learn about some of the new capabilities, because it's not only about new technologies, it's about new ways of engaging with customers, and it's about new ways of solving problems. And it's really important that from a service provider perspective, and it could be at CenturyLink or if you're IT and you're a service provider, it's really important to stay up to date with these new capabilities and new technologies, and that you're able to serve your businesses or serve your end users or institutions in the right way. And the only way to do that is through education, because this industry is moving just so rapidly. So this is, again, is off of CenturyLinkCloud.com. It's our knowledge base. We've got a huge amount of information there. There's actually more information on the public website than there is internally. We don't publish any of this information internally. So it's all basically transparent and out there, and it's available for all our customers to access. So education. Next thing is self-service empowerment. And we've talked about this idea a little bit before. It's about expanding this idea of automation into more of your business and allowing your end user to access the benefits of that automation. So going back to this idea of a medical researcher, if you have a medical researcher who wants to get access to resources to run some kind of analytics engine against some kind of research project that they're doing, allow them the access to do that. They don't necessarily need to go through IT and get all these approvals to do that. You're a service provider, you can extend that level of automation into your end users and into your end customers. At the same time, one of the challenges with all of that is how do you have you need to be able to do that, but still have visibility and control into what that person's doing, into the amount of resources that they're consuming, and to make sure that they don't go overboard and they don't deploy too much resources and run up costs. So when you're looking at a cloud provider, look at how they're able, again, I call it financial governance, how they're able to allow you as an internal service provider to your organization to have this level of financial governance and have visibility and control into the resources and what your end users are doing. All right, so in summary, last couple of slides. So we talked about, and again, the idea here is to share information that we've gleaned, that I've gleaned over the course of the last several years working with these different components within my team, there's different people in my team, and share feedback from them as well as sharing feedback from our customers who've successfully utilized our cloud platform. So we talked about definitions, ensuring that when you engage in a project, you know, your internal stakeholders know, your internal customer, the service provider knows exactly what it is you're talking about getting past the buzzwords. It's not about the buzzwords, it's about the true meaning of the words. Define your purpose, understand why you're engaging in a project. There are lots of reasons to engage, there are lots of reasons not to engage. Make sure you're doing it for the right reason and that you're leveraging the benefits of what public cloud can bring to you and to your institutions. We talked about different ways of evaluating service providers across different spectrums, and we talked about how our customers at CenturyLink, the feedback they've given us as to the kind of things they've done internally to make sure that cloud has grown, the benefits of a cloud platform has grown within their organizations. So this is my last slide talking about CenturyLink. So I talked earlier about this concept of hybrid IT. CenturyLink has grown through acquisition. So we've purchased and really transformed through acquisition. So we've purchased companies across all these different services. This is what we define hybrid IT. So this ability to provide public cloud, private cloud, co-location services, all within the same data center. The ability to bring in a CenturyLink private wide area network connection into that data center, and the ability to deliver managed services around all of that. And this is the portfolio of services we have. Our vision and where we're headed, so as I mentioned earlier, the service delivery and the buying experience across all these different services is very, very different. This one's fully automated. None of these are fully automated. There's different processes and there's different people to engage with as you deploy these services. So our vision, which is Platform CenturyLink, is to put a unified experience across all these services. And what that means is today you can deploy a virtual machine in a public cloud in 5 minutes through automation. Our last release a week ago, you could deploy a physical server through automation underneath the covers of the same platform. Over the course of the year, we're going to be adding the ability to deploy an MPLS connection coming into the data center, again through automation. So making all of these services that we have available through an API, through a front-end portal, push-button deployable. And it's a strategy that we're executing on very aggressively. It's not an easy strategy to execute on, so it's going to take several years before we're fully there, but we're definitely rolling out capabilities in that direction. And that's really who CenturyLink is going to become. So thanks for the time. Thanks for listening. That's me. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter. It's the new business card. I don't have any business cards that I want to use. So check us out on CenturyLinkCloud.com. And yeah, thanks for the time. We'll be doing a raffle in a few minutes. If anyone has any questions, I'll stick around for a few minutes afterwards. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for listening. Appreciate it.